Interview taken at Dr. Dorfman's office on November the 10th, 1977.
This 4th of July, Dr. Dorfman and I were honored by the community. But 26 years ago, when we started this, there was a great apathy, great lack of interest. It really had its genesis the year before, when we rode through the town and village on the 4th of July and saw scarcely any flags flying. But we were concerned because everybody was criticizing communism. Everybody was worried about communism, but nobody was doing anything to make Americanism glamorous for our young people. I made a motion that the Cornwall PTA invite all the other organizations in the area, in the community, to participate in a 4th of July program. Of course, nobody could vote against anything noble as that, so it was passed. That was before everybody watched the Tournament of Roses on TV, so we didn't exactly know how floats should be decorated.
And I never shot a firecracker in my life, and here we were going to have fireworks.
Well, we had a feeling that what we should have was a parade with floats of patriotic themes to be done in an amateur way, of course, by the various local organizations, that we should have a family picnic. I'd been rereading All Wilderness, O'Neill's story, which takes place on the 4th of July in that New England town, and it had made me feel very nostalgic. Felt that that's something that this very American community of Cornwall should be having for its families. And then, well, Dr. Dorfman got into it. He can tell you more about what actually ensued when he started proposing this. He first called a meeting of all the organizations interested, and most of the people who attended told him they had come to express their opposition.
And also that, I had my head in the clouds, that we were dreamers, that nobody's ever around on the 4th of July, there'll be nobody to see it. And I felt that they were they just had blinders on the sides of their eyes. They couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I said, well, did it ever occur to you why nobody's around? Why isn't anybody around on the 4th of July? And the obvious answer came out. They're not around because they go to other communities that are doing something. So I said, well, if we do something, then they'll come here. And I must say, boastfully and proudly, that it's turned out exactly that way, that our crowds have grown year after year after year, and we hear communications from people from many parts of the country, and actually from Europe, where people have children who are in Europe say, I'm coming home, and especially to be home for the 4th of July. Not only to be there, to be sure, but they want to be there for the 4th of July because they feel it's... And so it's been a great thing, I think, for the community.
Dr. Dorfman called a meeting, and various people expressed their doubts that anything could be made to happen in such a short time. Wasn't that it, David? I wasn't able to be there because our daughter, Sally Faith, this will go down to posterity. Everybody will know how old she is, but she'd been born that May, and so I wasn't running around to those evening meetings.
To begin with, we didn't know where we were going to hold the celebration, what part of town. And I was asked at a meeting, I had to go to the town board to get permission to hold such a celebration. And they said, well, where would you hold it? I said, well, I don't know. I said, I haven't given too much thought to this thing because it would be putting the cart before the horse. I must first have your approval, and then I figured we would find a place. Well, what did you have in mind? I said, well, we had to have a wide open area, and I thought of possibly the golf course, possibly NYMA, or some other open farm. I hadn't made any inquiries. This got into the papers the following day, and I got called by the superintendent of NYMA to come to his office, and I got chewed out like a buck private gets chewed out by a colonel. And I come back to the town board, and I said, well, we'll have it on the farm. The colonel said we could have it on the farm. Ah, said the superintendent. But
Supervisor.
the supervisor. The farm is both in the town of Cornwall and the town of New Windsor. So you will have to get permission not only from us, but from the town of New Windsor, which was beginning to make it more and more difficult.
Actually, I don't think more cold water or more obstacles could have been thrown in our way if we had tried to have a parade on May Day, celebrating communism.
It was just unbelievable.
Why? What?
When we started this thing, we couldn't think of anything less controversial than the celebration of the 4th of July in a real American community.
Where so much of American history had taken place in this area. Well, you see, Cornwall had been having Memorial Day parades for many, many years, but they didn't seem to realize that they would have had nothing to memorialize if there hadn't been a Declaration of Independence. That was the first thing that happened. Then after that, people fought for it. And then Vince, I guess, knew Dr. and Mrs. Donahue personally and spoke to them and asked if they would permit the group to have the celebration on their farm if it was okay with the village fathers. So that was when you had to work it out.
So then we had a meeting with the village fathers. And those fathers said, sure, it was all right. Insurance, well, their insurance would cover us, so that was no problem. And the Donahue farm looked like an ideal place to hold it.
Because Tom Delaney asked you if you had propositioned somebody. It never occurred to you that the man didn't know who you were and what you were talking
This
about.
fellow went into the feed store.
Yes, and
he said some nut stopped him on the street and asked him if he wanted to behave like him.
And Tom Delaney said that must have been Doc. He's all excited about getting people in the parade for the 4th of July.
So he called me in my office and said, did you stop them? I said, yes.
So we got him a horse, and we got him a
stovepipe hat, we got him a beard, and he was Abe Lincoln in the parade. He made a wonderful Abe Lincoln.
But the day, the 4th of July, people were working, they phoned, they said, how do we decorate? Well, we didn't know how to decorate a truck either.
Is that what you're leading up to now? When Vince Conley was here that afternoon and it looked cloudy?
It started to pour. The heavens came down about 1 o'clock.
Here we had slaved, we had worked, we had labored to give birth to this idea. And here God's against us. It's cloudy, it's raining, it's pouring. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon and our parade's supposed to start at 4. So Vince Conley was here. What are we going to do, Doc? What are we going to do? I said, the parade's going to go on. And anyway, then it started to clear about 3:30 or so.
A little later.
And we had an old Ford convertible with a rumble seat. And I got a hold of Ray Bradford, who was going to be the town crier in the parade. And we stuck him in the rumble seat with his costume and his bell. And we rode all through town with a rumble seat. The parade will go on, the parade will go on. We told them.
We got down to Dr. Donahue's farm, and of course it was knee-deep in mud. But people had taken their own folding chairs and blankets and their own picnic suppers. There was no stage. We had a pickup truck that was the speaker's platform.
It was a truck flatbed that was our platform. We had no other money to build a stage or whatever, and so we used a platform, a trailer truck as our platform.
So we had a very simple program. People saw the floats. They were all of historical themes. We just had a few marching people. We had Pocahontas, we had the Spirit of 76, and the rest were...
Abe Lincoln.
Abe Lincoln was on a horse. And we had a band concert. Professor Ortone's band and Gloria Santoro led community singing. And then we had the fireworks. And most of the people in Cornwall had never seen the fireworks before. And that was a very rewarding time when the children clutched Dr. Dorfman and said, "What's that?" "Oh, it's so beautiful." And he said, "Oh, that's fairyland." "What's that?" He said, "That's diamonds are a girl's best friend." He was
I had to give
angry.
a title to every firework that was shot off.
After the success of the first year, of course, there wasn't any question but that there would be another 4th of July celebration, and we tried to take a back seat, but when a vaudeville show was the primary entertainment instead of the history lesson that we felt was so important, we stepped back into the scene.
Well, I think you should say why we felt it was important. The idea of having a vaudeville show on the 4th of July was nothing unique. It wasn't really a fitting thing to have for the 4th of July. The 4th of July is to celebrate our independence and to go back and see some of our own history. You can see a vaudeville show any of the other 364 days a year, and you can turn on TV and see it to your heart's content. But you can't get an American history lesson every day of the year, and the appropriate time for it is the 4th of July.
Women of the area set to and wrote our first pageant. I think Jan Dempsey could really tell you a little bit about that. It was called The Fabric of Freedom, and she and Marion Mailer wrote it.
And got its name from an excerpt from George Washington's speech, in which he mentioned something about our independence being woven of a fabric, and this shall become our fabric of freedom, or something to that effect. Wasn't that it?
They started with the story of the Indians of the area who could have lived in Dr. Donahue's farm in that area, that particular spot, and who loved the river. And then it was a very folksy sort of pageant, and Dr. Dorfman was asked to be the narrator for the first year.
The interesting thing is that having the pageant, we then recommended themes for floats, so that each float would act as a scene in the pageant. So it would serve a twofold purpose. People would see it in the parade, and then it would line up behind our makeshift stage, and we already had our stage set because our characters were on the floats.
One of the many wonderful things about Dr. and Mrs. Donahue's Wyndham Farm is that if there is a breeze in the area, it does manage to waft itself down there. So we've usually been quite comfortable. Life's editorial had said it was so bad that no celebrations would take place.
Oh yeah, exactly, that was it. And one of our local people wrote a letter to Life magazine saying that they were mistaken. If they had been to Cornwall, they would have seen a real old-fashioned celebration, and the letter was published in Life.
And we think every community should celebrate the 4th. It's an important, the most important day in the life of our country. And our children should know that this country was not handed to anybody on a silver platter, that people had to work very hard to have it come along as far as it has. And while the ideals of the founders haven't all been fulfilled, we're still a lot better off than most of the rest of the world. Perhaps I'll say chauvinistically, any of the rest of the world.
It's got to be kept alive by new blood, by younger people who are inspired by the same kind of ideals.
But the story must be told and retold, even as the story is told at Christmas time, as it is told at Hanukkah, as it is told at Easter, as it is told at Passover. This is one of the great stories of the world, and it's the same old story, and please God, it goes on being the same old story for another 200 more years. We've never turned a child down who's come down to the field and said, "Can I be in the pageant? And my friend Veronica wants to be in, or Angelica wants to be in, or Jose." And we said, "Yes, we'll find a costume, we'll find room, we'll manage."